Hello, my name is Matthew Hunter with Legacy Wilderness Academy, and I'm on a mission to document every edible and medicinal plant in the southeastern U.S. so Southerners can have greater access to nutritious food and free medicine. In today's video, we're going to be looking at one of America's forgotten fruit trees, the persimmon tree. I'll show you how to identify persimmons, we're going to harvest them, and then I'm going to take them home and make some delicious persimmon nut bread. Stay tuned. Before we begin, I'll quickly mention that if you want to learn more about the useful plants of the southeastern U.S., make sure that after this video you download my free guide to medicinal plants, which you can find in the link in the description below this video. Persimmons are small trees found widespread throughout not only the southeastern U.S., but throughout much of the eastern U.S. They're one of the very first trees to lose their leaves in the fall, revealing their almost golf ball sized orange fruit, which can oftentimes be seen in very large numbers, even just driving down the side of the road if you're looking for them. The first thing I should probably show you to help you learn how to identify persimmons is the seeds. Now, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to see the seeds before I see the actual tree itself. And the reason for that is because you're going to find these in animal scat in the late fall. So it sounds kind of funny, but really one of the best ways to find persimmon trees is just as you're walking around, you're kind of just looking around on the ground, and as you're walking, you'll see some animal scat, and it'll have these big brown kind of shiny seeds in them, and it's very, very distinct. So these are persimmon seeds, and that tells you need to start looking up and looking around for persimmon trees. They tend to like to grow in more open areas. I've seen them sort of in deep woods, but usually they like a little bit more sunlight, so on the edges of woods is really where you want to look. So that's the seeds of persimmon. Here's what persimmon leaves look like. I don't focus too much on the leaves for identification because there's nothing that really stands out about them. They're not very distinct. They're just kind of plain looking. You can see here in the late season they really start to kind of look ugly. One of the more distinct features is this blackish looking spots all over them. Like I said, the fruit has it as well. So I'm not really sure what that is, but it is a good ID feature. Besides that, I'm really looking for the fruit in the fall and the seeds on the ground as my main means of finding the trees. Next, let's take a look at the bark. So a lot of times persimmon trees are so small that they don't show this characteristic, but on the larger trunks, you will notice a distinct blocky appearance on the bark. And this is more noticeable in some areas than others. I think it has to do with genetics to some extent. This one's a little bit blocky. In some areas, it's going to have almost a blackish color and be very distinctly blocky. And so you can learn to recognize the tree by the bark. So be on the lookout for that. But by far, the best way is to look for the seeds and the fruit, which we're going to take a look at next. Okay, so to harvest persimmon fruit, we want to give the trees a gentle shake. And we'll talk about the unripe fruit here in a moment. You really do not want an unripe persimmon. It's one of the worst things you can taste in nature. But a fully ripe persimmon is delicious. And so to make sure that we don't get the unripe ones mixed in with the ripe ones, we want to just give the tree a gentle shake. If we shake it too vigorously, the unripe ones are going to drop too. So we're going to give it a gentle shake. Let's see, maybe this one has better fruit on it. There we go. And then they start to rain. I don't know if you guys could hear that or see that on the camera, but they start to rain down. And it looks like most of the persimmons on this tree have either already dropped them and eaten by animals, or they're not quite ready. Luckily, we have already a few at home that's been processed. So we're going to pick these ones up. I'm going to show you how to process them. And then we're going to make some persimmon nut bread. Wait a second, I almost forgot to show you what the persimmons themselves look like. You can see here that they're orange. They're really squishy and like gooey. And then on the top, if you're brand new to identifying persimmons, they have these distinct 4-parted sepals. And actually the ones that dropped, unfortunately we came to this tree a little bit late, and so they're unripe. So I'm going to tell you here in a second about unripe persimmons, but for this video, we'll just be using a few for demonstration, and then I'll take some of the persimmon pulp that I have in the freezer, and I'll show you how to make persimmon nut bread. So you may be wondering, if persimmons are so good, how come I've never eaten them before? How come I've never seen them in the store? You may have seen the Japanese persimmons in the store, which are a lot larger, but the American persimmons are not sold in stores. There's a couple of reasons for that. So the persimmon is sort of a finicky fruit. It can be difficult to catch it at just the right time, which you've seen today. We kind of missed our little opportunity. So the difference between a ripe persimmon and an unripe persimmon is black and white. An unripe persimmon is going to be astringent, what we call astringent. If you've ever eaten, for example, an acorn raw right off the ground, just crack it and shell it, eat it, you're gonna notice that your mouth dries out and it has this tight feeling. There's nothing really like it. Persimmon is like that times about 10. It is one of the most unpleasant experiences to eat an unripe persimmon. Even just a small little bite will make your mouth just pucker. Now, it's interesting because as they ripen, if you get it fully ripe, the astringency completely goes away. It's really night and day. It's amazing. And it becomes almost pure sugar. So if you can get a ripe persimmon, then it becomes pure sugar. But then there's a few things of why it wouldn't be sold in stores. So first of all, they're really ugly when they are fully ripe. They look almost rotten, and the outside has like some blackish spots on it. Almost looks moldy. I don't think it is, there's no mold, but they just look like that. They have like a blackish like flecks on them. It kind of looks like mold. They're just really ugly. And then they absolutely fall apart. They're so gooey and full of sugar, they almost like melt. So even if you have just a little bag of persimmons, by the time you get home, they're gonna be all melted together into one mass. And so they have no shelf life. You can't sell them in stores. And then if you were trying to harvest them in like a large amount with you know, like modern like farm equipment or something, you would get so many unripe ones mixed in with the ripe ones, there'd probably be no way to do it on a large scale. So this is one that really only people who harvest from the wild are going to be able to get, or maybe people who grow them themselves. But I'm telling you, it's one that you're missing out on. It's an absolutely delicious fruit. It does take a little bit of time to learn how to tell the ripe from the unripe, but with a trained eye, you can learn to do that here. We only have a couple unripe ones that I'll just be using for demonstration, and then we'll bust out my good persimmon pulp from the freezer. Let's do it. Okay, so here's my poor, pathetic pile of puckering persimmons that I'm only using for the purpose of this presentation. First, you'll put them in a colander, preferably one with more prodigious perforations if you have it. Then you'll proceed to push the pulp through until they've all been processed into paste. So you can see here as it comes through, what we'll normally do, we'll just take it off like that. And then when it's all done, this is what you're left with. Okay, next we're gonna be making persimmon nut bread. So we're gonna be basically making a banana bread, but instead of using bananas, we're gonna be using persimmons. And the recipe we'll be following comes out of Samuel Thayer's excellent book, Incredible Wild Edibles. He has a hickory nut persimmon bread. And so we'll be pretty much following this recipe with a couple substitutes. We're actually gonna be using pecans instead of hickory nuts, and I think we're using butter instead of coconut oil. But I'll go ahead and put the recipe we use in the description below so you can see. And from here on out, my wife is going to take over and she's going to show you how to make some persimmon nut bread.
We are going to start with 3 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, which we have here in the bowl already measured out. And then I'm going to go ahead and add our 1 1/2 cups of chopped pecans, which of course we are doing as a substitution for the hickory nuts. And then we have some of just your baking basics like baking soda and baking powder. And it looks like we've got 1.5 teaspoons of each. Now we'll do 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Some would call that a pinch. Now we're going to do 1/2 tablespoon of cinnamon. You'll have to forgive me. I don't know where my 1/2 tablespoon is. And then we're going to do the same 1/2 tablespoon of powdered ginger. And we're going to give them a little whisk. Mix them up. Okay, so now preparing our wet ingredients. We're putting in our persimmon, 1 3/4 cup of persimmon. Now I'm going to put in 1 1/2 cups of maple syrup, 1/2 tablespoon of vanilla extract, 3 eggs, so we have all of our wet ingredients in the mixer all mixed up. The last wet ingredient is one of our substitutions, which is some brown butter instead of the coconut oil. And that is going to be a 3/4 cup of butter, which is a stick and a half of butter. And now we're going to mix that in. Now we're going to add our dry ingredients into our wet. So anytime you're dealing with a cake-like product, you want to mix your wet and your dry ingredients until just combined, and that's because the longer you mix your dry ingredients, you can get funny textures. So if this doesn't look mixed all too well, that's because I'm about to finish mixing it by hand, which is just what I like to do. So next we have here our greased casserole dish, and we are going to spoon our batter into the dish. We preheated our oven to 375, and now we're going to put our persimmon nut bread in for 50 minutes.
All right, so we left it in the oven for about 40 minutes. Let's go ahead and try some out, Georgia. What do you think? Pretty good? Pretty good. You heard it here first. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this video on the persimmon tree and how to make persimmon nut bread. Again, my name is Matthew Hunter with Legacy Wilderness Academy. And if you want to learn more about useful plants, make sure to download my free guide to medicinal plants in the description below and check out some of my other videos, which are popping up somewhere on the screen. Y'all have a good day.